Hi, good morning. My name is Fernando, and I wrote a few Raku models, like, for example, Red ORM. That was one. That is one of my models. I work on PayProp. That's a property manager rental payment platform, and there's a, there is the link for the company site. And several time ago, we we have decided to change the way our front end was working, and we decided to use components for that to try to abstract the HTML and just work with components itself. For that, that was decided to use nunchucks. Nunchucks is a template language written for JavaScript, and it is maintained currently by Mozilla. It has a macro concept that works just like a function that we used for mimicking components. So we have different macros for one for each component, and to create the component we use other components. So that's like a function calling different many different functions to build the HTML for each page. Uh, Nunchucks has no any type of parameter validation. It has no types. It it can be extended by JavaScript because you can pass a hash of JavaScript functions that you can use those each function inside of your code by the name you set as the key of the hash. So it's very extensible, and you can add many things that's not uh, built in, by default on nunchucks. For example, you can build type validations and that kind of stuff inside of nunchucks. You can also create new tags for it, but that's not on the scope. But that's very powerful tool as well. So we decided to use nunchucks, and for using nunchucks, we decided to write a tool that we call front-end tooling that will inject the new functionalities inside of nunchucks, and its job is to build the front-end code using nunchucks as macros, nunchucks macros as components. And we are building on templating time, on build time only. We are using the nunchucks template just for generating the HTML on build time. It's not being used on runtime. We have a template toolkit for that, and our Pro code use template toolkit for as template on runtime. So the how it works, we have a nunchucks code that generates our template toolkit code that is used on runtime while the application is running. So that's how it works. But were getting, because we were rewriting everything on our site. We were doing a lot of things at the same time, writing the component while we were changing the the code. So one component was being rewritten twice because while one person was writing the one component for one page, other person was writing the same component for a different page, and that was adding parameters and removing parameters and changing it. We were getting many problems with missing parameters. Sorry, my English is not good. So we're we're changing types of parameters, so that was giving error for other people and etc. And we have a lot of problems that type. So we decided that it would be easier to have something to validate parameters and types for us. So that's why we've created a Raku Nunchucks validator, if I could call that way. So we added JavaScript functions to validate types internally, and also to validate the parameters of a macro. And then we created Raku validators that would validate if all macros would be using the parameters validators for validating its parameter, if it were passing all the parameters for the parameter validators and test type. And we also decided that it would be much easier, instead of a developer to read the code to see how to use a macro, a component, it would be easier to have a documentation page that would list all the components and show each component how to use with examples and all the parameters, what are required, what the type of each parameter, and etc. So and we also wrote something for that. Yeah, and that made our usage for nunchucks as components much easier to use. And this is how it looks, one of our components. So we have the component itself, that the code below above the prompt. This one is a very simple one, and the code below the prompt is a hash that we also create with all the information for that macro, that we use that for validation and documentation creation. So that's how it works. So because it was working, but we had a build system that would use nunchucks, and that build system would also run a Raku code to use the Raku validator to validate the nunchucks code and etc. So I decided that it would worth to, instead of doing all that, create a nunchucks transpilator, a renderer in Raku itself. So that's how I started working on my free time. I mean, so I started working on static template. This is just the testing, a part of one of the test files, but it didn't went too far, because several time after that I thought that would make more sense to, instead of read the macro and the hash with the data for documentation and validations and etc., it would be better to have that inside of the language. So change a bit the nunchucks language to make to set the types and the parameters, and if the parameter is required or not, and etc. on the language itself. So I decided that I thought that it would be better to have, instead of having that macro I showed before, have something like this. So that way we would have each parameter for the macro and say what is the type for that, and default value, definition, not a definition but a description for that, and we could also have a description for the whole macro inside of that, and several examples, that would make much more sense. So the idea with typed nunchucks was to write nunchucks validator that would also accept those type hints, and also new tags for the description of a macro and examples and etc. But okay, that would make sense if the typed nunchucks would do everything, but it would be even easier, and the company was thinking on stop using nunchucks for that, maybe using Vue, maybe using React or something like that. Then I thought maybe instead of writing something that would parse the typed nunchucks code, and run that and generate HTML, maybe it would make more sense to code that would read the nunchucks code and generate AST that could be translated to anything, even to nunchucks itself, to run on nunchucks not typed. So that's how this model was created. It started, not finished yet, but a few times after that I realized that nunchucks is not the interesting part for anyone. It's just a language, it could be anything. The interesting part is the component, is making you not handle HTML almost. You just handle different components that the components do the HTML, and that's the interesting part. And then I remember that I have already done something like that before when I was studying React, and I wrote at the time Pro 6 React. This works as component and even use the component keyword. So this project was implementation of React with many quotes on that on Raku on Pro 6 at time, and it would not run on the browser, of course, at the time, but it would, when you do a request for that, it gets the component and render that and return the HTML. But it also has a WebSocket component inside of the generated code that you can, when you do an action on your browser for one of the components, it sends back to the server the action you've done, regenerate the code, and then send it back the difference from the virtual DOM and the generated DOM. That's not like that, but yeah, kind of like that, and would send back the generated code, and it will replace it on the browser. Another thing that I played with components and Raku before was when I was when the JavaScript backend for Raku was launched, I was playing with memoized DOM, and this one is a component thing that yes does run on the browser. It on the GitHub page for that we have an example of that running, a to-do example. There is a link there that when you click, it sends you to the page that the page itself will compile the Raku code and run on the page. It takes a long time to compile that, and then when you click the link, it shows loading, and it takes almost a minute, I suppose, and then it starts the to-do example I've done. The code is that one. Not only that, but here is just an example of the components, and that's it. After that, I tried. Okay, so when I was playing with React, I had a Java HTML-like thing inside of the component. When I was playing with Memoized DOM, I did not write the slang for doing the JSX part, but it was cool. So I think, is there something else I could use that looks like HTML and would work for rendering code? So I thought that, yeah, maybe using Crow web app template would be a good idea. So I started working on this, and I think it was very, very cool. But if you see on the template code, you see I had to use many times the HTML and JavaScript function. I don't know how to call that. Sorry. And I even opened an issue on Crow web app repo on GitHub, asking if it would be possible to add something to when you return from inside of template string specialization with some type of specialization of JavaScript. It would mean that this is meant to be JavaScript, for example. So we would not need to call that function. It would be called by default, I'd say. So that would make that web component way of using Crow much easier and much more readable, in my opinion. But at the end, now I'm playing with a new component style. I just learned about HM Max. I think that's very interesting and different. Oh, and this one, the Crow one, it's also uses WebSocket. So we store all the components on server side, and to make it possible to send the actions back to the server changes the component in memory and sends back to the browser the difference. So with HMX, it would be much more interesting, in my opinion, because we would not need to store in memory all the components as we do with web components. So I started playing with HTML components, and my idea is to just work like this, and my time is ending. So if anyone have any interest in playing with components in Raku, please let me know and help me, because I always need help. Thank you very much.